And before I share what this is, I want to blend in a little story because I feel like it adds further context and it will help this point really hit home. So one of my many roles at the RCA has been for a number of years, I'm the inquiry guy. Meaning over a web call, I'm speaking with recreational and amateur road cyclists at least on a weekly basis to ask questions and identify where they're going wrong in their training. If I can do that and then share some low-hanging fruit items that they can implement into their training, that's normally a sign that they're going to get value from our coaching services at the RCA. The back end of 2024, I was speaking with a gentleman by the name of James, who's based in Singapore and is a senior business analyst, so a very smart dude, and he'd been reading and researching a whole bunch of training literature online for a number of years. And as a result, he'd actually built his own plan, which is what you can see here in the flesh. This was a spreadsheet James had going. For reference, system is Wahoo System Workouts. So on this initial web call with James, I could literally see everything he was doing. He'd gone to the extent of putting his whole programming into a spreadsheet, and I'd never seen that level of detail before from somebody who'd never been coached before. And it turns out James was doing a lot of things right. He'd spent a lot of time building base aerobic fitness up front. He was doing interval training, targeting specific zones. He was progressing his training slowly using progressive overload techniques. He wasn't doing too many back-to-back intense training sessions. And he was even doing some sprints in the local group ride. In terms of the bigger training picture, James was really doing a lot of things right, except this one big thing. I lean into my computer screen or into the web call and I said, James, do you ever have an easier week? James leant back in his chair like he just had an epiphany and he was like, nah, I don't. And I can tell you from the many hundreds, if not thousands of calls I've had with the Road Cycling Academy over the past 6 or 7 years, 99 times out of 100, and that's being probably generous, people are not implementing easier weeks, strategic easier weeks, into their training. And when they start doing this is often one of those really meaty, low-hanging fruit items that helps them step off a performance plateau and take their cycling to the next level. So in this video today, I want to share with you 3 big things. Number 1, I'm going to explain what not having an easier week does. Number 2, I'm going to explain what an easier week actually looks like. And number 3, I'm going to share how often you should be having an easier week. And this is even relevant for those people who are not doing any structured training. In fact, it could be more pertinent if you're just doing the local group rides, social rides, your Strava circuit, the same rides week in, week out. Having an easier week is relevant for everybody that rides a bike. So, number 1, what happens if you don't have an easier week? So I know most recreational and amateur road cyclists will ride somewhere between 4 to 5 times per week, and on average will have somewhere between 6 to 10 hours of available training time. At worst case, 4 to 5 of those rides will be at intensity, and best case, 2 rides will be at intensity. What do I mean by intensity? Well, at the RCA, we like to think of anything that gets a good rise out of your lactate system, which for many cyclists is just riding at tempo or zone 3 in a 6 to 7 zone cycling training model. But either way you flip this, whether you're doing 5 intense training rides per week or 2, at some point in time you will start to accumulate fatigue. And of course, if you're doing 5 intense rides per week, it's going to accumulate a lot faster. But what we need to consider at a recreational and amateur level, and let's look at this research paper here where they assess the training, work and life stress demands of a mixed gender group of 48 top amateur short distance triathletes. And that is, while sports related stress accounted for most stress, there are other major considerations we need to keep in mind as people that have other commitments like work, family, kids, whatever it may be. So while the research that I'm going to share below and share in this video often relates to more of an elite level rider, let's not forget at an amateur and recreational level the additional stresses that we have to deal with in our lives, and often the poor recovery we're doing after our local group ride, where instead of doing what elite riders would do, foam rollers, stretching, ice baths, we're getting in the car, driving straight to work, not stretching, and possibly under fueling. So here at a very high level is what can happen when you're not incorporating an easier week. Number one, hormones such as testosterone, cortisol, and growth hormone are all going in negative directions. Blood work considerations such as a decrease in red blood cell counts, hemoglobin, hematocrit, and even your iron levels. Your heart can be affected, such as an elevated resting heart rate or higher blood pressure or even arrhythmias. Cognitive function can also decrease and maladaptation or muscle staleness can occur. And while this is just a handful of detriments that can occur from training too much, it's my view that the maladaptation, the fifth one that I mentioned there, this is sort of me speculating from dealing with recreational and amateur road cyclists on a weekly basis, is the culprit that tends to hold a lot of recreational cyclists back. Because many are just doing the same old rides week in, week out, constantly stressing the muscles with the same stimulus, meaning it's probably no longer a stimulus and your body is just used to it. Therefore, your working muscles become stale and you hit a performance plateau. So even incorporating an easier week is variation in your training load. Your muscles will be like, oh, hang on a sec, I haven't rested like this for a while. I can now absorb that physical stress from the last 6 weeks of back-to-back training, and I can be fresher for the next weeks of training. And if I can be fresher, I can stress myself further and I can create more fitness adaptations. And that's why even if you keep doing the same old, incorporating an easier week can have its advantages in itself. Number two, what is an easier week? First up, it is not a rest week. A rest week is doing nothing physically stressful at all, which has its merits, and we'll certainly recommend it to our members who are doing 6 to 10 hours per week consistently, training to structure. We'll recommend it perhaps once to twice a year. But that is not what I'm talking about in this video today. An easier week, or a recovery week, or some of our RCA coaches call it a deload week, and these all tend to be used interchangeably, ultimately means we're reducing the volume, which is your training time, and we're reducing the intensity, which is how hard you are going for each session and week to week. And of course, it doesn't have to be a week. It could be 5 days, it could be 10 days, but ultimately you're giving your body a strategic chance to rest and recover and catch up, rejuvenate, and prepare yourself for the next round of training. So in our world at the RCA, coaching recreational and amateur road cyclists, this is what an easier week would look like. But first, let's look at a standard week with some intensity, which might be 10 hours of training time with 2 high intensity interval training sessions, 1 longer social ride, 2 base training rides, and 1 recovery spin. So if that was a standard week, an easier week would be 7 to 8 hours of training time, 2 base training rides, 1 to 2 recovery rides, and 1 hit out. Could be a local group ride or a Strava KOM or even a high intensity interval training session. But ultimately in the easier week, just 1 hard ride, and you'd probably have that towards the back end of the week. And we're ultimately reducing the volume and intensity combined by around 1/3. What you'll find if you start incorporating these easier weeks strategically is the week you get back into the training, or maybe the second week back into the training, you'll have this freshness, this ability to push yourself or extend yourself further than you have been able to previously, which feels good because it feels like you're improving, and is also going to add additional stress levels which you weren't able to achieve before in a fatigue state, which should then, provided you recover properly, turn into fitness adaptations. Number 3, how often should you be having an easier week? In most of the research and progressive overload plans, you'll find or often see builds being somewhere between 3 to 5 weeks. At the RCA, we like to go conservative, as most of our members are between the ages of 35 and 65, meaning they've got a lot of life stresses. So we tend to stick with the 3-week build as a general blanket. Not 100% of the time, but as a general blanket. And the 3-week build is not linear, and I'll explain why in a second. So as you can see here, and this is grabbed from an article on our site, link below, we have an easier week, moderate week, then a hard week. And we've found for recreational and amateur road cyclists with about 8 to 10 hours of training time per week, this works really well as a general blanket. But for example, if one of our members is going on a family holiday or vacation for 10 days and they can only get access to a gym bike for 2 or 3 of those 10 days, we will then manipulate the program. So instead of doing a 3-week build leading into this 10-day vacation, we might do a 4-week or even a 5-week build depending on the member's conditioning. And therefore, strategically, we're leveraging that 10 days and manipulating the 3-week builds to accommodate. Of course, if some of our members are really well conditioned, we might as well do 4-week builds. So it's not always linear, as I said, but as a general blanket, if you're in that sort of 35 to 65 range and you've got a lot of life stresses, the 3-week build tends to work really well. So I hope you got value from this video today. If you did, don't forget to give it a like. Helps the channel out. And of course, if you're interested in incorporating the 3-week build and you want to work with somebody, please see a link below where you'll be able to work with an RCA coach one-on-one. We'll catch you in the next video.